So you want more? Well, you're going to get more. In this more block, we're going to create a walking animation that takes in 2 parameters. And we're going to do a little error handling while we're at it. Alright guys, so in this video we're going to create a more complex animation using a more block. It's going to be a walking block. We've done a simple walking block animation, a link in the description below if you need to get to that. But in this animation it's going to take in 2 parameters or 2 forms of input. The first input will be an L or an R, which will indicate the direction in which we want our sprite to walk in, left or right. And the second input will be an integer between 1 and 7, and that will indicate the number of steps we want our sprite to take. We're also going to incorporate some error handling into this function or block. So if the programmer enters invalid input, the function will let the programmer know this. So let's make it happen.
Hey Scratchers, welcome back. It's a new year and we got some new coding to do. In this project we're going to create a complex walking block. So if you look at my walking block, it takes in 2 parameters. One is a character, which is the square block, and another is an integer, which is the circle block. So if you look, I have the first block taking in an R, which means to the right, and 7 steps, and then to the left, 7 steps. In other words, Jamie will be pacing. Very nervous guy. So let's watch it happen. I hit the flag, 7 steps to the right, 7 steps to the left, 7 steps to the right, and it will keep happening until I hit the stop sign, which is right about now. Okay, fellow Scratchers, let's make this happen. This more block's going to handle a lot of different things, including multiple parameters and error handling. So I opened up a new project, I hit create. The first thing I'm going to do is name it appropriately. So I'm going to name this project Complex Walking Block. Don't need the cat, so I'm going to get rid of it. Right click, delete. The sprite we're going to use for this project is the Jamie walking sprite. We've used it for our last walking block that we created. So we need to go get him. So under your game area, you will see new sprite. We're going to click on Pico. Jamie is a person, so I'm going to click on people. It's alphabetical, so I'm going to look for my J, and I see Jamie walking right here in the middle. Double click. Now I'm going to go to costumes. If you notice, we have 5 costumes. In each one of these costumes, he takes 1 step to the right. So we're going to create a block that's going to have him move to the left as well as the right. So in order to do this, I'm going to create 5 more costumes. They're going to be the exact same costumes, except they're going to point to the left. So I'm going to duplicate all 5 of these costumes in order. So I'm going to mouse over costume 1, right click, duplicate, 2, duplicate. I'm going to go to 3, duplicate, 4, duplicate, and 5, duplicate. Now the first 5 costumes will be the same. We're not going to touch them. That's Jamie walking to the right. However, 6 through 10 need to be flipped. So I'm going to go to costume 6, and over here on the upper right hand corner we have a 180-degree flip. So I'm going to flip it so he's pointing to the left. And I'm going to keep doing that for every costume I just created. So 7 is going to flip, and 8 is going to flip, and 9 is going to flip, and lastly I'm going to flip 10. So now 1 through 5 is Jamie walking to the right, and 6 through 10 is Jamie walking to the left. And it's important that we note that. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is start to create or define my block. So I'm going to go to scripts. I'm going to go to more block. I'm going to make a block. Now this block is going to be called walking. And before we OK out, we need to add the input or the parameters. So under options, the first thing we're going to do is add a string input. Now our string is going to be 1 character long, but it's still a string. So I'm going to click on string. And this second thing we're going to add is a number input for number of steps. So I'm going to click number input, and then I'm going to hit OK. So now you can see we have our block, and it takes in 2 parameters, a string and a number, but we have not defined it. Alright, so the first thing we need to do, and this is the error handling part, is we need to make sure that we've put in proper parameters. So for our string or character, we're only going to accept 2 letters, an R or an L for left or right. Anything other than R or L is not correct. And for numbers, we're going to accept anything from 1 to 7. 7 steps, it will take Jamie from one side of the screen to another, so we don't want him to walk more than 7 steps, and obviously you can't walk less than 1 step. So let's take care of that first. Now let's think about what we said. The character parameter needs to be an L or an R. But that's really 4 possibilities because our programmer might put in lowercase or uppercase. So we need to take care of all 4 of those conditions. So let's think about it. We go to operators. There are 4 things that this string can be. So I'm going to get 4 equals. And we're talking about the string, so I'm going to pull the string into each one. Now the string can equal either uppercase R or lowercase r. It could equal uppercase L or lowercase l. Anything else is a mistake or an error. And either one of these things are okay. So as I've been saying, that means or the Boolean command or. So we have or command, but we need 4 slots because we have 4 possible conditions. So I'm going to nest or commands until I have 4 voids. And then I'm going to put each one of these in a void. So this complex statement that we just created is a statement that indicates all the acceptable string input. So if it is not any of these things, it's an error. So I'm going to get the not block, and I'm going to stick this whole complex statement in the not block. Now I'm going to go to control and get an if statement. And we're going to say, we're going to put this whole I'm going to grab the not. I'm going to put it in the if statement. So in other words, if the programmer entered any other letter other than R or L, we need to tell them that they've made a mistake. And how we're going to do that is with the look say for 2 seconds. And we're going to tell them what the mistake is. The mistake is incorrect value for direction was entered. That will appear for 2 seconds, at which point we'll go to control and stop the program. Stop all. Okay, so if our character parameter is okay, the next thing we need to do is check for our integer or number parameter. Now Jamie can take anywhere from 1 to 7 steps. So our number has to be greater than 0 and less than 8. So let's get those. Greater than and less than. So greater than and less than. and it's our number. So the number has to be greater than 0 and less than 8. Now, last time we used an OR because anyone was acceptable, but in this case, we need both to be true, so we're going to use an AND Boolean command. Once again, this is what's acceptable, so if it's not any of these things, then it's an error. So once again, in control, we're going to get an if statement, grab the not. So once again, if this if statement is true, in other words, our number is less than 1 or greater than 7, we have an error. So what we're going to do is go to looks. We're going to get the say command for 2 seconds, and we're going to say invalid number of steps taken. And then we're going to go into control and stop all. Now, if we make it past these 2 if statements, it means we have valid data. And so now we need to get Jamie to walk. So this will be more familiar to you if you've done the simple function. But if you did not do the simple walking function, not a problem. The first thing we need to do is take care of one step. Now, because we're not going to be iterating through all the costumes all the time, we need to do something a little different. For example, if he's walking to the right, he's just going to iterate through costume 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then back to 1. And if he's going to the left, he's going to be iterating through 6 through 10, and then back to 6. So to get this to happen the way we want it to happen, we're going to have to use a variable. And this is going to be a counter. Counters are very commonly used when programming. So let's go to data. We're going to make a variable. And this could be for this sprite only, because it's only going to be dealt with in this particular block. And we're going to name it counter, C-O-U-N-T-E-R, counter. You can name it C, you can name it X, whatever works for you. Okay, so let's deal with one step. In order to do a step, Jamie has to iterate through 5 costumes. So to do something 5 times, we're going to go under control and get a repeat loop. And we're going to repeat 5 times. Okay. Now the first thing he's going to do is switch to a costume, whichever costume is more appropriate. If he's moving to the right, it's going to be costume 1. If he's moving to the left, it's going to be costume 6. But we'll deal with that in a minute. Let's go to looks and just get switch to costume. Now the costume is going to be indicated by the counter number. So let's go under data and get counter. Now don't worry about what counter's value is, because we'll deal with that in a minute. Each step is going to be 10 steps. So go to move or motion, get your move block. We're going to move 10 steps. And as you may recall, if we don't have a wait command to control the speed, it's going to happen way too fast. So let's go under control. So get a wait command. Now as you may recall, 1 second is way too long. So we're going to wait for 0.10 of a second. 0.1. And now we need to switch costumes. So what we're going to do is simply iterate the counter by 1 or add 1 to the counter. So if counter is 5, then it's going to be 6. So go under data and say change counter by 1. Now this is a step. It's actually a step to the right, because moving in a positive direction is going to get us to move to the right. So when do we want to move to the right? We will want to move to the right if the programmer entered in an R. So let's go and get an if statement under control. Now remember, he could have or she could have entered either a lowercase or an uppercase r. So either one is acceptable. So once again, we're going to use an OR command. So under operators, we're going to get a Boolean OR command. And we need two equal commands. 1, 2. And it is the string that's going to determine the direction. So from our block definition, I'm going to get string 1 and again string 1. And once again, to move to the right, it could be an uppercase, Shift R, or a lowercase r. Now we programmed one step over here, but our programmer is going to tell us exactly how many steps between 1 and 7 to take through this parameter number 1. So we're going to repeat under control. We're going to get a repeat loop, and we're going to repeat as many steps as we want to take. Not 10, but number. So if the programmer says 1, we'll do this 1 time. If the programmer says 5, we'll do 5 steps. Now because we're moving to the right, we need to set our costume to the appropriate costume. So if you remember costumes, the first costume to move to the right is costume 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is get from data, I'm going to set the counter to 1. Underneath or after I've set the counter, I'm going to take my step. So what we've created here is nested repeat loops inside an if statement. So the first repeat loop is 1 step. The second repeat loop is how many steps we want to take. And the if statement says move to the right if the user entered an R. Well, what if the user enters a left? We almost want to do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this whole block of code. So I'm going to get my duplicator over here. It looks like a stamper. Click. I'm going to duplicate that code. Now we just need to make a couple of changes to make this work. The first thing we need to do to go to the left, we need to change the input from R to L. So under string equals uppercase L, string equals lowercase l. If you look at the costumes, the first costume moving to the left is costume 6. So we're going to set the counter to 6 if we want to move to the left. And the last change we have to make is the direction in which we move. So instead of moving 10 steps, we're going to move -10 steps. There you go, people. Believe it or not, we have created a compound or a complex walking function. So let's test it out. I'm going to have Jamie walk to the right first, so I'm just going to move him to the bottom of my screen. I'm going to go to events, grab a flag click. I'm going to go to control, grab a forever block, and we're going to create him pacing just like I showed you in the example. Under more block, I'm going to take 2 walking blocks. The first one is going to take in an R, and we're going to go 7. The second one is going to take in and put uppercase left, and we're going to go 7. I'm going to stick these 2 blocks in my forever loop and click the flag. And there we go. Jamie's pacing and it's looking good. I'm going to stop the program. I just want to make sure it can handle the errors. So I'm going to type in a W here and run my program. Incorrect value for direction was entered. That works. I'm going to type in a -9 here. Flag, invalid number of steps taken. So there you go, guys. A complex walking function or more block. A lot of things can be done with the more block. If you have any ideas, shoot me a comment. I'll make it happen. Otherwise, like what you like, subscribe if you haven't, and as always, we'll see you next time.
So you want more? Well, you're going to get more. In this more block, we're going to create a walking animation that takes in 2 parameters.